Uh, Rwei-ren and Eric. Hi, Eric. And they are actually both old friends of mine. And I think this combination in Excel is very interesting. Let me highlight some of the background of these two speakers. Rwei-ren, both of actually are coming from a student activism background. Rwei-ren was the student union chair of the National Taiwan University back in 1982, right? 82? 83, I'm sorry. Okay. And Eric was the student union leader of the Chinese University in Hong Kong in 2010, right? 2010, right? Yeah. So and both were engaged in activism and then on the way to engage the scholarship. So I think it's very interesting. I also learned a lot from their presentation. Let me comment on Rwei-ren's first, and then come back to Eric's observation on Hong Kong. I have the privilege to have the written note of Rwei-ren a few days ago. I think Rwei-ren done a great job to provide us a macro level of observation of the entire post-war development. It's a long durée observation of what happened in the past 70 years. I think they are great insight, especially Rwei-ren pay attention to how geopolitical forces have been shaping Taiwan's trajectory up to now. And I think Taiwan's story can be divided into two parts. Number one, the first part is how civil society was initially suppressed and then grew and ended up in transforming the one-party authoritarian rule. It was a remarkably successful story that fulfilled the expectation of so-called modernization theory in the sense that you have economic growth, then you can have strong, robust middle class, then the regime was given way to the demand for democracy from below. But we all know that such a prediction is not universal valid for the fact that economic downturns have become more and more usual, and also middle class can be very conservative. So Taiwan has become a very few case in that success. And the story's number two part is how the resurgence of the civil society to meet the challenge coming from abroad, especially after the democracy is consolidated. And again, in Rwei-ren's observation, the student activism also play a very important part. It's spearheaded by the 28 Wild Strawberry movement onward all the way to 2014 Sunflower movement. And so far, Taiwan has proved resilient in resisting China's authoritarian expansion. But we all know that Taiwan's democracy are under existential threat. On the military front, we have daily incursion of PRC jet flights into our airspace. And on the non-conventional front, fake news, misinformation campaign has become a daily reality for us. And many organizations, people here in Taiwan are being targeted at for the purpose of the United Front Offensive. And these people including business people, educational institutions, religious groups, community organizations, labor unions, students, and other civil society, actually you name it. So we are facing a very pervasive and inclusive threat. Again, just like the old Cold War, Taiwan has become one of the flashpoints of global confrontation due to its geopolitical location. In the past, Taiwan authoritarian rule was tolerated and even encouraged in order to serve as a military bastion against the worldwide expansion of communism. But in the emerging new Cold War, Taiwan's vibrant democracy has gained more international sympathies, and our people has enjoyed the benefits of freedom and human rights for more than 20 years. So in the past, Taiwanese people do not have a choice on which side they are going to be with. The decision was made for us. And now Taiwan have a power to decide on their common future. So that's quite different. And again, with the Hong Kong's recent evolution in front of us, I think it is going to be an ultimate test for people in Taiwan, whether they are willing to give up their cherished free lifestyle for the purpose of money making, personal safety, or other reasons. And I think the world is observing whether people who have accustomed to breathe free air will surrender themselves to the aggressors simply for the reason to obtain protection within the cage. So the challenge is not only faced by Hong Kongers, but also by Taiwaners, and also by people and nations in the neighboring regions, and increasingly on a global scale. So it really comes down to a problem whether democracy is capable of defense itself. And we all know that political freedom is not free. And there are a lot of problems with existing democracy, especially after the COVID threat. We know that democracy can be messy and slow to react. And our leaders are not necessarily going to make the necessary but unpopular decisions. And people, our citizens, can be selfish, reckless, to endanger the health of themselves and others. And these are all the problems we know. But we have to, I think the problem for existing democracy, including Taiwan's, have to find a way to reconcile individual freedom and the necessary collaboration for the common good. I think this is going to be a challenge. So worldwide, Democrats have to be vigilant, I think. As for Hong Kong's, I think Eric had done a very careful and detailed documenting of how the space for Hong Kong civil society and the political opposition has shrunk since the imposition of national security law last summer. I think they are very good. Very good representation of how law, court, and the police have become weaponized to suppress the freedom in Hong Kong. And the situation is very dire, and it takes many people by surprise for the speed of its evolution. Few Hong Kongers would have expected the evolution prior to the announcement of the national security law last summer. I think we probably, with hindsight, we can say this is a Tiananmen moment for Hong Kongers and a moment of truth for Hong Kongers. Maybe to echo Eric's observation, maybe we can zoom out and to enlarge our time horizon. So actually, prior to the 1997 transition to PRC sovereignty, there are many doubts about the viability of the Hong Kong as a free city under the Chinese rule. So there are massive migration wave after the 1980 Tiananmen incident. But I think there are a political economy explanation for Hong Kong's continuous viability even after the 1997 transition. Because of the Chinese need of foreign investment and technology. And China was not accepted into the WTO until 2021. But what happened is that there is a vanishing of the Hong Kong's advantage in terms of financial resources, and also that the same process happened to Taiwan. We have the advantage of technology manufacturing capacity, and that advantage is also fastly shrinking with the economic rise of PRC. So that actually encourage more aggressive and ambitious move from Beijing. So we all know that by 2014, Beijing had firmly said no to the democratic sovereignty that is promised in basic law. And in 2019, Beijing took a further step, try to integrate two legal systems. And then we saw the protest over extradition bill become the largest uprising ever known in that city. And now we all know that the last year's national security law have changed everything. So it is Beijing who decided to push the envelope. So the moment of endgame emerged much earlier than expected. It was not in 2014. The supposedly granting exploration of the one country, two system, it was last year. So it really become a challenge for Hong Kongers. In the past, Hong Kongers have proven themselves to be multilingual, versatile, and innovative. And this quality has helped them to tide over the difficult era of the early post-war era, when the city was suddenly lost the mainland connections. So what happened is that Hong Kong emerged as one of the shining examples of economic miracles globally, even without mainland connection. So again, I think Hong Kongers are facing a new difficult times. They are called to demonstrate their resilience again, with the city forced into the silence. And I think Eric also make a good point that there are seeds of hope even in the city currently. There are many courageous acts of hidden resistance that's going on. But I want to say that another factor need to be considered is the Hong Kongers overseas communities. they are going to play a more important role, just like what overseas Taiwanese has done for their homeland since the 1960s. I think that Hong Kong's global diaspora will become a necessary component to regain the city's freedom, even though it might take years and decades before that being realized. And finally, I want to, I'm coming from a social movement background, I want to say something about the strategy of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. I think I want to argue that there's a fundamental necessity to rethink on the so-called no main stage movement style. We all know that the anti-extradition movement of 2019 is very fluid, leaderless, and spontaneous. It's much more decentralized than the 2014 umbrella movement. At that time, we have a stage in the Admiralty, and the students were in a dialogue with the government. So we do have leaders back in 2014. But in 2019, we witnessed the power and beauty of the so-called leaderless mobilization, that everyone can be a campaigner. There are so many roles to play in a fight against a tyranny. So many people join in that campaign in different ways. I think that somehow reflects the whole trend of flattening of the social movement. So increasingly, we see social movement become more horizontal, less hierarchical. And in certain circles, leaders have become a dirty word. Nobody wants to be a leader. Actually, leaders is much hated. And such trend took place long before the social media and mobile technology had become prevalent. And undoubtedly, they have reinforced such decentralization trend. So just in one of the page that Eric showed, that in January this year, 47 pro-democracy leaders have been arrested under the national security law. And the crime was that they joined a primary election in June, just one month before the national security law. And many of them are still behind the bars. And Joshua is among them. He is facing more and more Trump-up charges, and no one knows when he will be free again. So I think you can see clearly the communist strategy, how to, in an attempt to neutralize opposition and to isolate this particular person. So I think it's really require fundamental rethink of the value of leaders, that they can be variable assets for pro-democracy movements. So my final observation will be coming back to Rwei-ren and Eric. These two people are coming from a student activism background, and there are many people with the same background in both in Hong Kong and Taiwan, and I think they are going to play an increasingly more important role in the campaign for democracy, whether in Taiwan or Hong Kong or elsewhere in the world. And I stop here. Thank you.